Hi, I'm Piero Giorgio, author of Survive the Economic Collapse. Today, I'd like to review the latest book of James Wesley Rawles, Expatriates. Now, James Rawles, you must know him, of course, is the very famous author of How to Survive the End of the World as We Know It, and of the novels of the same series, Founders, Survivors, Patriots. And this is a fourth book of that series. Now, it could be read as a standalone story, and it also fits what Rawles has written previously. So, as a fellow writer, it's always very difficult to make a review or a critic of another writer. First of all, because Rawles is like the author of prepper and survivalist movements in the US, and it's just fantastic. Now, I say that it's not because I'm going to say things that are bad. Actually, I'm going to say things that are good. But what I want to say is that actually this is a great improvement. This book is an improvement over the previous novels, Founders, Survivors, and Patriots, in the sense that I think that, first of all, it's hard to me to say I'm not an English mother tongue guy. But certainly I found that this book, Expatriates, first of all, is much better written as the others. So it's an improvement. So if you think the others were fantastic, this is even better. Now, what is important, I think, with these books is that there's a lot of messages. Now, I'm not going to tell you the story, just to know. I don't want to give you any spoilers on the story of this book, but just for you to know that it covers during an economic collapse, which James calls the crunch, which is the same as he explained in his previous books. This time he takes the setting overseas for of course, someone living in America. So he's putting the setting a little bit in Florida, but most of the story happens in the Philippines, Indonesia, and mostly Australia. And he basically covers how during the economic collapse of Western world, United States, and probably, of course, Europe at some point, how some countries might become prone to wage war, invasion over others. Now, the point is not about whether it makes sense in this particular case or not. It could make sense. An invasion of Australia by a neighboring power, it's possible. And certainly, it's an interesting and exciting story. What is the point, however, of these books, and this one in particular, is that it's a way to use literature, to use, in a way, a story, to actually give some examples of what could happen when the economy collapses or when what you believe is normal goes away. It could be happening through economic collapse, as Rawles has scenarios, as I do as well. It could happen through other ways. It could be if a government becomes tyrannical. It could be if you have invasion for a foreign country. It could be if there is a major environmental disaster. It could be many, many reasons where you would find yourself and ourselves in the kind of situation that this book and the previous books explain. So there's a lot of small examples on in this case, for example, how you evacuate a country with a boat, how you connect with people, how you deal with the day-to-day survival requirements, and how you find water, food, health, and first aid, as well as how you link bonds, how you create bonds with people. All the things that I also explain in my books, by the way. And I think it's a very interesting way to have a science fiction or a fictional story to tell you about them. Also, you do find a lot, and I think this is the what I guess James Rawles prefers to talk about, because it's a very important part in all of his books, and of course, and rightfully so, about defense, how people manage to get weapons, guns, ammunition, and how important it is and how precious it becomes when there is no more supply and when things become tough. And therefore, how we should prepare today for those kind of scenarios and others. The only caveat, if I have to say something negative, or let's say a constructive critic of this book, is probably downplays a lot of the turmoil that would happen, in this case in Australia, because of the multicultural setting of the big cities in Australia. He mentions a little bit about it, and it's not very important because anyway, he did mention that in his previous books, talking about the chaos in the United States because of people of many ethnicities fighting each other and creating even worse environments for most people. So it's not a very important critic, but certainly I would have found that both Indonesia, also the Philippines in a way, and of course Australia would have had much more internal troubles because of the fall of the world economy, as he described, because if the United States falls down, and as it will, eventually the world economy falls down, as it will. So that's a minor point. But generally speaking, it's a very, very good book. It's published, I think it's a Penguin book, but it doesn't matter. You find it on Amazon, you find it on your libraries. It's about, 300 pages long, easy to read. I read it in a few hours. I made a lot of little notes on how I work my preparation myself, and that there's some good advices that I will write down and take for my own preparation. So overall, if you read English, of course, I encourage you to read the latest book. And again, it can be read as a standalone book, or it can be read as the follow-up of the previous books, the previous fiction books of Rawles. And if you don't know Rawles, what have you been doing? Get End of the World as We Know It and read it. That I think is one of the main books you have to read. For my French readers out there, I think there's a French edition that came out. It has been extremely badly marketed. I don't know why, but not everyone can market well its books. But certainly, it's a very interesting story, and certainly it's a pleasure to have read it and to also send my regards to Mr. Rawles if he watches this, because he has been an incredible contribution to my own awakening and preparation, and of course if one is like me, not religious or agnostic, of course sometimes you feel that there's a lot of religion in his book, but you cannot be against that, because obviously he writes about what he believes, and that's great and that's fine. So there's a lot to learn. And of course, it would have been interesting to see positive characters in other religions and other nations other than Anglo-Saxon Christian. But that's okay. That's okay. Anyways, good book. I encourage you to read it. It's I don't know what is the price, but anyway, it's affordable. It's a book, and the book, contrary to electronic format, stays with you. You can put it in your library. You can give it to your friends. You can give it to your kids. You can give it to your spouses. A book is better than electronic format, but maybe that's because I'm an old dude now.